Can I get that
Oh, is it?
box there?
Sorry.
Sounding a bit like that.
Other one.
You know what a pepper is?
Red top.
Well, I was wondering, you mean somebody who is getting prepared for the future by...
Sounding a bit like that.
Well, I was wondering, you mean somebody who is
Preparing, but in a very specific way.
So the live stream's working.
Okay.
That was proved. Great. So we're ready to start in, as we normally do, reasonably on time. Okay? And we'll try to end them reasonably on time as well, as per tradition. All right.
Yeah.
So although I did just hear the door, but that's okay. Great. So starting. Hey, what's going on? So we'll start in as we normally do. Hopefully this has become a tradition at this point. And we started with our joke, okay? So Wikipedia, one of the mighty gods of the modern world, speaks and says, I know everything, okay? So then the mighty god of Google chimes in and says, I can find everything, right? And so then the mighty god of Facebook jumps in and says, I know everybody, okay? As you see where this is going. Then the internet comes in, right? The bigger god, and says, without me, you were all nothing. Okay? And then electricity comes in. Keep talking, bitches.
I think that gets us back to my comment.
Yeah. Great. So then...
Who's in charge of the body?
So I've added this kind of feature here, like some quotes or quotes to our kind of regimen, because I think that's cool. The great discussion points are usually from brilliant minds. So here's one. Television won't be able to hold on to any market it captures after the first 6 months. People will soon get tired of staring at a plywood box every night. Yeah. Right? That was predicted in 1946 by an executive who I would reckon would have some pretty good insight into these type of things. And this leads to the first point of the evening, which is the interesting thing about the technological landscape that we live in today is one that is extremely difficult to predict because we don't have a precedent. There's so many unprecedented things happening right now in technology in all these fields. Our minds really don't have a precedence for making decent predictions on where all this technology is going to go because we have no relevancy. We have no other objects to compare it to. It's outside of our frame of reference, right? So predictions are best made by people who have a large knowledge of something and have a greater control over the variables or greater understanding of the variables increases the likelihood of predictions. So in modern times, I think people will turn to the statistician much more than they turn to the mystic or to the oracle these days, kind of in general, just as first thing we talk about with cultural shifts and stuff like that.
There's an implicit assumption that those two things are not identical.
Good point. So I think if you were to take an oracle or somebody who's a palm reader or something like this, that type of genre of predicting the future, and you were to score their accuracy over time versus someone or a group of people that rely on statistics and evidence to make their predictions, I think you would see over time what you'd expect to see. Is the ones that relying on facts and statistics are probably likely to have higher rate of accuracy in their predictions than those that rely on what kind of lines you have in your palms.
Yeah, but basically they're just trying to predict too many variables from too few data points. That's their problem.
Okay. And also, taking that one step further, we can kind of see in this faith versus fact kind of modern dichotomy world that's been popping up for a while now. We've seen some division amongst people along those lines as well. So Steve actually introduced me to a book by that title, and came from an interesting way. I first had an image of the book title, and then he actually had the book. So of course, it had to be read and discussed a little bit. So very interesting. So in the modern context, we find a lot of people kind of having a lot of faith in technology and science, and maybe starting, for lack of better terms, starting to perhaps lose some in some of the traditional religions and their kind of point of view. And so we're kind of see like kind of a narrative that gets created by this kind of way to predict what the future is. We look now towards our data and towards other things to predict more so than we do the oracle, right? So anyway, this quote was a kind of a lead into that concept because of how poignant it points that out. This person would have probably the top knowledge in this industry, and then makes that prediction about and was 180. Couldn't be more wrong, right? Most prevailing electronic device used to present now. Computers are taking that over, but still TV is still a dominant feature in most households. In fact, it's almost a shrine. If you look at most people's households, the couches in the living room are all oriented towards facing the television. They're not facing each other for dialogue and conversation amongst people. They're focused on the shrine.
How do you know that's not a computer screen?
Well, it could be today, but traditionally you'll go into most homes and you notice that the couches are arranged towards the television, right?
Well, plus before the flat screens, you'd have a new television on top of the old.
Yeah.
That doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And with the cell phones, I mean, how could they believe people are going to look at a little screen littler than the palm of your hand?
Sure.
Or something.
Yeah. Steve Jobs made a comment. One of the top tech guys made a comment just exactly like that.
Yeah.
When I was looking at quotes for today, I found that.
Well, we don't, except for the few things we have to.
Yeah. So this is a recap of this basic definition of technology philanthropist. This is a recap for people that were here, and just to refresh, or weren't here just to get a first taste. And this is a definition of what a technology philanthropist might be. Is one who believes technology should be implemented and advanced for the betterment of all of humanity, with an emphasis on the all, not applied unilaterally.
By that definition, they're not necessarily a philanthropist, which actually contributes something.
Well, we can dissect it, and probably
normally
much better. I
Gives
made this
money
up,
to something,
yeah, give
or
money to something.
gives some kind of improvement.
Well, coming from this idea of this belief system, if you believe that technology should be employed in a way that kind of lifts all boats together, I think that's kind of a different vantage point than most people see it. And so you would probably have an advantage, lean more towards a philanthropist in that case than you would, the traditional way. So that's kind of the idea here. It's just saying that, hey, we should take this technology and we should use it to raise us all up together. It shouldn't be used to empower or exploit or be used to leverage each other or control. And we can find a lot of examples of that and how technology is used. And the big conversation last week was weaponization, right? So here's an example of that. Weaponization of technology is selectively using technology to gain control or power or dominance over somebody else. And so this is saying you probably shouldn't do things like that. Yeah. So we talked about choice, and we had these different choice topics that we walked through. Default choice, what that means. Default choice is like what you get by default, right? So if you don't choose, that's kind of what you get. A choice array is a kind of a buffet of choices for you to choose from, and that array of choices being already pre-selected for you. In the case of buffets might be a good example. Let's say that you go to a Chinese buffet and all there is Chinese food out there. Your choice is still Chinese food. It's just micro choices within the realm of Chinese food. So that's a choice array. An implied choice is the choice that you feel is expected of you to make, right? And implied choice is extremely powerful over human psychology, right? There's implied commands and there's implied choice. Both are extremely psychological powerful. If you're at Walmart and they load the bags in the little carousel thing and they spin it towards you and they start loading the next bags, what do? You take those bags and you put them in your cart. Don't even think about it, right? So nobody told you to do it, but it was an implied command. You were made to do that by the mechanics of that device. So technology is used all the time to make people act in a way that's determined. There's some that are obvious and that necessary, and we'd consider good uses of this. For example, like if you come up to a light and it turns yellow, you'll do something, right? You should slow down, or speed up. Yeah. based on who you are and based on how close you are. But
are there any cops in the area?
yeah, all these things.
Does anybody happen to know what the actual rule says?
Got to be in the intersection before it turns red?
No, you have to be able to stop before it turns red. If the light turns yellow, that means if you can stop before you get to the intersection, you should do so.
Nice.
No, I thought the rule was don't be in the intersection when it's red.
No, that's not the rule. The rule for the yellow light is if you can stop, do so.
Yeah, prepare to stop.
Well, this all does make sense because I read one time a long time ago that the number of failures on the DMV test for the written part of the test is quite high for the first attempt. Yeah. So makes sense that there'd be confusion on what the rule actually is.
Well, I don't plan to start doing that.
Well, whatever works for you, it doesn't kill anybody. It's good, I guess. So choice illusion is the last one on this list. We talked about a couple other ideas behind choice, but choice is so important because in automatic systems or computerized systems or heavily technology systems, a lot of times it's an algorithm that determines choices, right? And increasingly every time as more and more technology comes online and we progress into the future, technology is making more choices for us every day than ever before. So it's very important how those systems are structured because it ends up having a big impact on our lives. So last on this list was choice illusion, and choice illusion was talking about a binary choice or a limitation of choices that's completely artificial. The example used was like if I wanted my child to have vegetables with her chicken, I'd say, would you like peas or carrots with that chicken? So it's not really a choice. I mean, yes, she's choosing in that micro choice, but I've already chosen the vegetable. I've chosen the broader category. In our contemporary United States society, it's Democrat or Republican. Okay, there you go. Yeah, wait, I'm not opening that Pandora box. Erase that last sentence, forget I ever said it. All right, so the first topic that's now new for today is this concept of statutory laws. And I like using this metaphor because it's so strong, is that we put all these protections in place for minors. We have, like, not ones with pickaxes, I'm talking about young people, right? So we put in all these laws for people that are underage to protect them from predatorial behaviors of adults, right? And in doing so, in that protection, we kind of all just understand it. It's something that's kind of comes natural to us. Protect children, right? The reason we protect children from other adult human beings is because they don't have the intellectual capacities in many cases. They don't have the emotional maturity. They don't have the knowledge, they don't have the wisdom, they don't have the mental sophistication to compete, if you will, or stand eye to eye or toe to toe with an adult brain, with an adult mind. And so that adult mind can very easily take advantage of the child mind. There's this common expression, it's like taking candy from a baby, right? What's the baby gonna do? It's defenseless. The adult has all the power. So these laws that are designed for someone of an older age that's considered adult to not have intercourse with a younger child are there to protect them from being coerced into that behavior from an adult, right? We all know what those laws are. So most people agree that those are appropriate laws. Most people believe protecting children is appropriate. But why? What is it that sets a child so differently apart from the adult? Well, it's the mental development, it's the experience, life experience, the cognitive, right, and physiological development of that child. Well, what protects us as adults from hyper-intelligent AI or some type of advanced system that is so dominant over our brains that it would be that same metaphor, just another level up?
Like cell phone providers.
Great one. Or someone that has such a large data set on you that they can begin to really hone in on use of language, use of colors, use of all kinds of symbology to get you to act in a way that you normally wouldn't, right? So the most savviest of salesmen, the best used car salesman in the world type model. Okay, there's currently no laws on the books protecting anybody from this type of behavior. And
there's the Sherman Act.
That's to say again?
There's the Sherman Act. Monopoly
Expand,
laws.
yeah, expand.
No monopolies? That was repealed de facto as there are monopolies, and they were not stopped.
The Ticketmaster.
The Sherman laws were put on the books to address sort of at least that relationship.
Okay.
They may not exist specifically around technology, but they could probably be applied.
I read Novant's Novant Healthcare, not to call them out, but it's just relevant because it happened today. I read their privacy policy, their revised privacy policy today at length because they had a published copy of it. And I took it and read it. And I literally fell out of my chair. It's like, there is no privacy. I'm like, whoa, right? Welcome to 2017, United States of America. It's atrocious.
Once you give somebody your information, why would you expect it to be private?
Well, I mean, there are some privacy laws that protect people, but this idea of the statutory state, this idea of someone creating a superstructure or some type of super body of information about an individual, and then using that information for any way that they see fit, there is no law in the book that I know of that protects us from that on a daily level. Just saying.
I think we should pass just one law that says information about a person belongs to that person, no matter how it was collected, no matter where it is stored or how it is accessed. The information belongs to the person. Hence, profit generated from that information would
Also
also
belongs
belong
to
to
that
the person.
You tell me I don't have the right to tell people you have glasses?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Well, I wouldn't agree to that.
No, you can say it, but if you try to make a profit on it, that profit belongs to me.
Or does he get a cut?
No. Not unless he comes to me and asks me for a cut.
Yeah, yeah.
Value
Well,
added.
no, you're saying I can't stand on the sidewalk and make a note of who walks by. That's not even my
No, I'm not
information.
saying you can't
I
collect
think
it.
that's Ben's.
I'm saying after you collect it, you don't own it.
That's mine. I've been drinking that. No, that is an unworkable model.
Well, so the point here, though, is like, you have this idea, Michael. I mean, you just threw out a preliminary idea here, which is great. You have this idea right out of the gate of somehow that's your property to some extent. Like, information about you, sensitive, personal, private information about yourself is within the domain of kind of your possession, if you will. And so there should be some type of, well, Michael could answer that. Why do you think that way, Michael? Why do you think that's your property, quote unquote?
I would say ownership of an idea, a thing like that, requires not that I defend why information about me shouldn't be mine. It's about me. I have a connection to it. Why should it belong to somebody else?
Because it's in my brain. I have neurons specifically
No,
for
I'm
you.
not, but that doesn't say that you can't have the information. It's saying any profit you get by virtue of having that information is mine.
So you think if I invest in some glasses making company because I see a lot of people wearing glasses, you think you deserve a cut of my investment?
No, only for the ones you give me, only for the money you make on my glasses.
But in part, knowing that you wore glasses would have helped me to choose that investment.
Sure, so we're not gonna like really split the hairs about the nuances of this like just instant impulse model that Michael set out. I don't think we'll be well served to do that, but let's look at the concept of what we're saying. Like what's the fundamental underlying thing that's triggering this type of response to the idea of someone else collecting your data?
I'll offer.
Well, we got Cosmo first, yeah.
Yeah, let's
The hands get first.
I'm
dibs.
wondering, I have problem commoditizing, thinking of information as a material thing. I don't think it is. And even though it can be kind of like sequestered and charged and used as a commodity, I don't think by nature it is. That information is far more relational, intangible. For instance, the computer now with websites, a material thing would be that only one person could see the website at one time. That would be, if it was a material thing, one person could possess it at one time. But it's not that way. Multiple people can possess it in a sense, or can participate in it. Just like what we're here at this table, this experience is not a thing. And I don't think that it can be commoditized unless it is sequestered and blocked from other people like that.
When did privacy come into existence? When we were living on the Serengeti or in the jungle, I'm assuming there was no such thing as privacy. In fact, nobody would want that. They would want to make sure that They all knew what was going on with each other and so forth. And so how did it come about that privacy comes into existence as some kind of entity?
I would assume, just to not really think about it much before I speak, but I would assume to answer that question would come with the complexity of civilization, then becomes compartmentalized areas of activity that some people would want to keep refrain from others just based on social judgment, social, implications of that activity.
Well, it has
So
to
people
do
can't
with
use it against you.
Well,
Right,
it's
exactly,
based-
that's it right there.
It's
Because
based
the
on
complexity.
relationships, because privacy starts between friends, between two people that are communicating or whatever.
Yeah, so we had Ben, wanted to jump in?
Yeah, so Michael proposes that we remove the profit motive from the collecting and aggregating and leveraging of data, particularly about people. But that's not an abstract idea. In other words, we don't have to imagine that alternative universe. We can visit it. Most of us have probably spent most of our adult lives in civilized countries. One of the definitions of a civilized country is that you can get a credit card. You can, I'm driving a 15-year-old car out there. I just finished paying for it 3-4 years ago. So for the last 15 years, that car has been carrying my daughter around to her hockey games or soccer games, hospital, all of the things that we've done as a family. Rather than waiting 15 years and saving up the money to buy a car, which I wouldn't even need 15 years in, because I don't have, my daughter's moved on and the need is no longer there. We in civilized countries purchase the things that we will use throughout our life ahead of, we use them sort of in reverse order. We use them and then we pay for them. And in uncivilized countries, that is primarily the difference. That they do not have a system in place that will allow them to get a house and or a car and pay that off during the course of use. So they spend their lives saving up for a house, living in their parents' basement. Maybe when they're 45, 65 years old, they could buy a house, which at that point they don't need because their parents died. And so this squashes the economy, it reduces the standard of living. Nobody in a civilized country would opt out and opt for that model as an improvement.
I wouldn't say nobody.
Virtually nobody, statistically,
Yeah.
which is the same thing. And so that's the corollary. Now, what allows that to happen, the principal thing that allows that payment structure to happen, is that we have credit systems. And those credit systems are primarily predicated on data collection.
I think I was 38 before I took out a credit card. Because with my husband, we were very much against debt, and I very strongly believe that you don't have to believe in going in debt to be civilized. But I understand there are advantages.
But you live like you're in the third world.
Yes.
I ain't joking.
Okay. But
So Michael-
it maybe helps the economy, but it's got a whole lot of people in trouble. It hurts the economy for us to be so much in debt too.
Okay.
So it's got to be a balance of that probably. Yeah.
Sure, Michael, you trying to jump in here?
Last 3 times I bought a car, I paid cash.
Cool.
I have 0 debt. I have credit cards now because it turns out to be a convenient way to automatically pay cyclic bills. But that's not really, I would just as soon, and most of my bills are paid by draft from my bank account with an agreement with my bank, so that's not even a credit card, but there's a couple of holdout companies where your only choices are a check or a credit card or whatever. So, you know, I do that because I don't need to try to change their lives. I just do it their way and try to arrange so it doesn't bother me. But the fact is, no, I don't borrow money to buy things that I need. I save my money. And I've tried to explain to so many people, if you just don't spend any money for a month, and then after that, pay for next month's stuff, with the money you didn't spend this month, everything you own is going to cost 11% less.
Sure, so look at, I mean, you're definitely an outlier then in that, you know, look at American economy, definitely, you know, indebtedness is a predominant, you know, feature across the American landscape, and the debt spending that Ben is describing is definitely prevalent in all, like he said, first world countries. And you know, I don't know if that, how that relates so much to privacy. I think you were trying to allude to the idea that you have to give up some privacy, like you have to give up some information about yourself to some extent to enable that system. I think was that where you were going with that?
Yes, absolutely. Credit lending companies require information in order to set the risk.
Yeah.
So they have a credit, you have a credit report.
Oh.
And in countries that don't have credit reports, people can't borrow money. So there's some cutting edge work being done that involves accessing your phone and using all the data that happens to be in your phone in order to set your credit rating. So it turns out if you call your mom twice a month, you're a better credit rate than if you don't. Turns out if you have more than 15 people that you regularly communicate with, you're more socially tied into the community, you're a better credit risk than if you don't. So there are data, personal in nature, that help people who loan money to understand that you're not just going to disappear, that you're a part of the network, part of the community, and that loan will be paid back. Not only do we borrow money when we're young in this country, but we invest money when we have it, and we use that investment in order to fund our retirements. So what we have is a transfer of wealth from young people who are working to older people who are retired, and a transfer of investment from older people who have it to younger people who can use it to elevate the standard of living and put themselves in a car and a house and an education and a job and a career. This is the fundamental economic magic that makes civilized countries.
Assuming all those things are good things, though.
Yeah. No, I think it might be an economic
I think that might be where
nightmare.
Cosmos wants to come in on this.
So if you're desperate for money, then in essence, the bank could require you to divulge any information the bank wanted to do. I mean, there would be no real restraint on the bank, and that gets us down to the point where it maybe the whole economic system is milking people who are desperate. It impacts them the most. It can make the most demands on that. A person who is desperate for a job will do nearly anything. And so a person who is desperate for a loan will reveal anything.
So it could be looked at also as sort of like a scheme to get people's information and keep them under the thumb for the majority of their working lives.
Well, I think that debt does keep people under the thumb.
Okay.
Well, the money system is essentially slavery, right?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about that in throughout. This is meetup number 23 for this group, by the way, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So time flies and you have fun. And so that's been raised so many times. I think we should talk about that in the near future. The whole money system, fiat currency, fractional reserve lending, all that stuff, how the system kind of works. Look at economic colonialism, some real, how kind of money moves the world. It'd be a really interesting topic.
Well, like for example, how did Richard Nixon take us off the gold standard?
Yeah, how? I
I
don't
mean,
know.
did he just sign a piece of paper or?
Probably threatened to shoot anybody who didn't go along with it.
Wasn't it basically like one of those midnight things in Congress, the late night stuff they do or something from what I read? Yeah. Someone have to look that up.
The original limitations on ownership of gold were done by presidential action, so they didn't require congressional action to undo. That was done by Roosevelt to stop the flow of gold out of the country because political interests had fixed gold at an unreasonable price, and if we didn't do something about it, all the gold would leave.
Sure, I thought Congress was what enabled for the Federal Reserve Act. I thought Congress did push that through.
No,
But
that
I don't know why,
actually-
we'll look at that when we talk about currency and, that idea of
It wasn't
slavery.
about gold. This
Yeah.
was the ownership of bullion, no.
Yeah, and I even understand a lot of Americans today believe our currency is backed by gold still.
Well, you gotta
More.
wonder, considering the price of gold, I mean, how much would we have if we had just continued to buy gold with all this stuff?
Quite a bit, but there's not that much, so.
I mean, yeah, that could be one of the biggest.
I'm not sure how that would work.
But that could be one of the biggest mistakes of all time.
You don't want to back by something that you might find a big pile of underground and destabilize all the economy.
So, this notion here of this protection from advanced technology is, I think, an important one, and people should be looking at this from multiple angles. This actual, like, looking at rights, if you will, for how human beings are going to be situated against the kind of tidal wave of technology that's happening right now and is coming, right? So this last thing that I have on this particular slide is the bystander effect. Is since this bystander effect is when someone is injured, if there's an injury, if someone in this group or someone in public at large is injured in some way, the more people that are part of that group, the less likely any given person in that group is likely to act. Okay, to do something, to physically go in and put hands on and do something about the situation. So in other words, like the highest chance of you doing something is if you're the only other person there. So if there's two people in a room and one starts choking, the one who's not choking is likely to get up and help any way they can. Okay. If there's two people in the room, the probability that any given one of those people will get up and help reduces. The more people you add, statistically, the more unlikely people are to jump up and try to help the choking victim.
What's the logic behind that?
Well, the logic behind it is somebody else is going to help them, and then you get into this thing is like,
The logic behind it is there's somebody helping, so the other person doesn't have to help, and the more other people there are, the higher the percentage of folks not helping is.
right.
Because one guy's
more
helping.
qualified
And
to help.
in
Someone
most
more
cases,
qualified, all
it's-
these other psychological things.
But no, I
Peer
mean,
pressure.
Peer
the
pressure.
end result is, once one guy is helping, we get out of his way, and the rest of us are not helping.
Okay, but
But
once the
it's
group,
just, it's the consequences of the numbers, not the intent of the individuals, is all it takes.
Well, helping becomes a performance, and a lot of people
No.
don't want to.
If there's 100 people in the room,
be evaluated.
they're not all gonna give CPR to this guy.
the problem is
Gotta get
when the group gets
Thank
big
you.
enough, you can't verify that nobody is helping. If it's all if it's everybody in one room, you can see that somebody is helping or nobody is helping. But if it's larger that can fit in one room with millions of people, you can't check who is helping and who is not.
How
So
about-
nobody helps.
How about considering the population as a distribution of responsibility? So that if I'm in the room and you're choking and I'm the only one in the room, then I've got 100% of the responsibility to take care of it.
Should have all
Whereas
choking
if
insurance.
Bill and I are here, then he's got half the responsibility, and I got half the responsibility. So the bigger the group, the greater the distribution of responsibility.
I
Depends
will
who's
agree
choking
to
as
do
well.
that if you buy from me choking insurance, else I might not help you.
So the bystander
Just
effect.
The
kidding.
two of us, we have to determine which one of us is going to be better at the CPR.
You could do a team effort.
No, we can just,
Two-man CPR is the most effective, but it's
Yeah,
just
that's what I
being
meant,
just
though.
being a smart ass at that, yeah.
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 One
But-
for breath,
but-
one for pumping.
Yeah, that's right. It's the most efficient, and they can trade off when
How about 12-man
the heavy roll.
CPR? How much more?
No, I think that's less efficient.
Tag team.
But then the rest of them aren't helping.
Yeah, well, they could
Take turns.
Or they could get out of the room.
perceivably help in other ways.
They might get out of the room.
But
That would
the
be
basic
helpful.
psychology, though, is that any given person is less likely to help the more people there are in a crisis. It's as simple as that. That's the
So
understanding.
that was research, that was proposed, there was some research, follow-up research done on that. And I think that follow-up research undermined some of the original proposal, but I'm not sure where that ended up.
Okay, so I just wanted to talk about. Go ahead. Steve.
The more choices there are, the less likely you are to choose.
That's sort of like that choice array that we talked about, yeah.
Hmm.
And then this bystander effect, now mixed in with technology. So as technology becomes this veil over our society, okay, more and more, the technology serves as its own agents. Technology will serve as its own agent. For example, we joked about it several times already, is this Ashley Madison AI thing, right? Where these guys are in there chatting with what they think is females, it's just a sex bot or whatever, okay? And they're getting like really, really into this sex bot or whatever it was, not knowing it's a sex bot.
Oh, you're so hot, Eliza.
And you know, then hacker hacks the website, reveals all the names of the subscribers to the site, unless they pay, unless Ashley Madison pays. Ashley Madison says no way, and then they release all the names online and got guys committing suicide, right, and things like this. Marriages ending in bad divorces, etc., and so forth, because of this type of thing. Well, the person was just chatting with a robot, right? And so then we get this bystander effect where technology starts serving in as actors or agents, just like a person would in these different things, increasing the numbers of around, thereby having a natural bystander effect on our psychology. If you see where I'm going with that. Yes.
I think you chose a poor example.
Yeah,
Well,
I
I
gotta
can
tell
make
you,
it better
I
one.
think that if every single one of the women who was very angry because their husband was online talking with women, I don't think very many of them would have felt a lot better if they'd found out, no, they really weren't women, they were just robots.
You don't
Well,
think?
she got them, I haven't got, you know. I mean, I don't think it would have made them feel better.
Silicon implants, I think. Is the
Hard drive.
Well, it's kind of like the Stepford wives, they're being replaced.
So, to some extent, Facebook might be the better example. It may or may not be full of bots in the same way that Ashley Madison was. In other words, Facebook is not standing up.
Oh, yes, it is.
Artificial dialogue partners necessarily, but it is choosing the dialogue partners for you in a very deliberate and intentional way.
Okay.
Probably more intelligently than all of Ashley's Madison's AI bots put together. And does it really matter at the end of the day whether I am making up a line and feeding it to you, or whether I'm choosing somebody who already wrote a line and feeding it to you, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah,
at the end of the
right,
day,
right.
that's the same, right?
Right.
So I don't care what you say as long as I get to choose who you talk with or something like this. Like it can have the same effect. And the point is that Facebook is far more ubiquitous than is Ashley Madison. And so I think that in a way, you know, the suicide that may come out of Facebook might be the United States of America in the form of this most recent decision. But
So have you seen these, like, kind of some of these bizarre modern versions of quote-unquote protests, where you have one or two people carrying signs and protesting and 1,000 other people with cameras videotaping it? Like, with their phones videoing it? I have a picture on the screen about that, you know, as a joke. Like, this is the modern assembly, this is the modern protest. One or two people saying something and then 100 people videoing it to put it online.
Hey,
You know?
that's a protest just to film it.
Yeah, I mean, you see this. Like, if you look at some of the news footage and you see like 100, 200 people in the frame, and you see 75 of them are videotaping it, and 25 are like, you know, battling back and forth. You know, it's like, what the heck? That's really bizarre. That's a new form of this bystander effect.
Wait a
Everyone
minute.
is,
Is that from Japan or something?
yeah, it's just an image of a bunch of people standing around videotaping. You know? It's just to show you like a crowd
And a million is just
all
like,
videotaping.
Yeah, I
something.
know, but I think that the Japanese generally tend to do that, you know, and much more, that's much more of their behavior than Americans. So maybe we're heading that direction. You know,
Oh, definitely. When you saw that
technologically
Charlottesville
more-
stuff, I mean, the stuff in Charlottesville was that way too. You had so many people standing on the periphery videotape, videotape.
I mean, there actually is help to that, because you can send it directly. There are apps to send it to the ACLU and all this kinds of stuff live.
So that's a technology creating the second layer of bystander effect is what I'm saying. You know, I'm just a person on the outside edge videotaping. I'm not really part of this, but you are, because you're part of the numbers, you're part of the masses, and you've made that crowd bigger.
So how would you distinguish that they're an outsider as opposed to a protester who is a witness?
Yeah, that's actually what was my point, is that they create part of the mass. So if you go down there just to videotape it, you're still there with the action, like you're still adding magnitude to that protest or to that volume of human beings that are involved in this event. But you're doing it now in a totally different way. Your role is now bystander rather than, right? Like active
I wouldn't
participant.
call it a bystander. I would. A lot of people go to protest to put their body there, to make the statement that they are there.
Right.
And they're not bystanders. They are kind of like, they're participants.
Occupiers.
Numeric
That may be
participants. So they're numeric participants.
But you know what? The thing is that I can remember that dreadful day in 1969 when the revolution was fought and lost on television. There were 500,000 people on the mall for the moratorium to end the war in Vietnam. And I got to tell you, most of them were just partying. I'm sorry, you know, this is always true at demonstrations. There's the people, and it was really funny because back in those days there would be a guy at the front saying, "Okay, everybody who wants to be arrested, get up here in the first 20 or 30 lines, okay? Those of you who are willing to be but would prefer not, okay, that's the next 40 lines after that.
Sure.
Those of you who don't want to be arrested, stay on the outsides of the crowd so you'll be able to get away."
Sure.
So that's part of, if you have a true mass movement where 100,000 people are part of the organization, and we're hoping to get attract some other people, you know that the people you're going to attract are going to be counter demonstrators and fellow travelers and innocent bystanders and curious people.
Let me give a better example so that my bystander effect idea doesn't go out the window here. That was a weak example. Sure.
I've lost track of what you are meaning by the bystander effect.
Well, my next example might clarify.
Is it inhibition of behavior
Yes,
of bystanders?
It's technological agents adding to the psychology of another participant in an exchange, thereby reducing the human culpability towards or responsibility towards acting. Let me give you an example that's clearer, I think. I go to the bank and I have some transaction I need to do, and you know, I have my account and all that stuff, and I hand it to the teller. The bank teller takes my thing and immediately starts going like this and keying in the computer. And what I'm saying now is not even registering with the person. They're looking at whatever the computer says, right? And they might come back with, oh, the computer says, they might even refer to the computer as an agent, like, the computer says blah, blah, blah. The computer didn't say anything, right? The computer has something on display on the screen that she sees that I don't see. So this computer has become another agent in this exchange that the teller is now using as a proxy to not have to engage me.
It's her boss.
Yeah, more or less. But it's become another actor in this exchange, between people. You see where I'm going with this now?
Yeah, it's taking the heat off her.
Taking the heat off of her, right? And so then I could actually get mad at the computer. No, that computer's wrong. I put the money in yesterday. You see what I mean?
So the teller is the bystander in a way?
Well, what I'm saying is it contributes to that bystander effect. It lowers the culpability of the people in the exchange because the technology is serving as an agent in this exchange. So now the total culpability is lowered. That's probably a better example of what I was getting at.
Actually, the teller is the agent.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but
with no useful power.
So I feel like that agency has been a fixture in that transaction since the abacus and the most primitive form of mathematical stick counting.
Right.
The guy who
now imagine
this ledger says,
Yeah, I mean, just a basic, clay tablet ledger would have the same.
Right, so a lot of people use these devices, use these technologies as props to achieve that effect.
It worries me when we start talking about like the technology or the computer being an agent. To me, that sounds like metaphoric thinking, metaphoric language.
How about entity?
I'm sorry?
How about entity? Let's use that.
Same thing. In other words,
It's a tool.
agency has been a concept applied to animal life, essentially, and to ascribe agency to a computer, I think, is a linguistic kind of maneuver that that we could maybe take for granted, but really has some errors built into it or something.
The computer has simulated brains in it. It's an agent.
We've entered in a new realm of technology. And that new realm of technology allows computers to not just simulate, but act very much like human beings, human brain. For example, this Ashley Madison example, there's people falling in love with a chatbot. Mm-hmm. And love and these type of entangled emotions are not non-serious things. Those are serious implications.
That doesn't mean that the computer is an agent.
But as far as
what the
human being believes, though, is that's a real person. They're in love with that person.
Okay, define agent without referring to humans.
An
That's a
agent
good
is
question.
that which gives action to a system which would, without the agent, be unable to act.
I
So
think
that is vague.
The Constitution the Constitution exists. It's a thing. It's an instrument. But without people that can act for it, against it, it lacks agency. So it needs in this case actors to step up and give it agency. Otherwise, it just remains an instrument. And the same is true in a bank and all the rest of it. The accounts can be instruments. Somebody has to reach in and grab a dollar bill and pass it over the transom, right? So
That's just an input-output.
in a way, an ATM can be thought of as an agent because it gives agency to the instruments in the bank.
I think
in ways that we would have traditionally thought of people doing.
I think we're dealing with the very powerful, complex free will versus determinism problem. Under what circumstances do you ascribe free will to an entity? So the scientific model is a deterministic one, and computers operate according to the laws of electronics and so forth.
They can take
That
a
used to
random
be
sample.
true. Yeah. Go ahead, Ben.
They can take a random sample from the microphone hole to get a truly random number.
Truly random numbers exist.
I'm sorry, let's go to
Well, in
Cosmo and
physics
then
it's
Michael.
random.
I'm
Which probably
saying
is
that the agency
physically
is
chaotic.
an agent is a person who can make, or not even a person, an entity that can make a decision. And I think that a computer can. For instance, in Wall Street, they have computer programs that make transactions. They write
Sure.
the computer program. If it goes to a certain level,
Right, the
it
majority
sells
of trades
or
are now by
buys.
computers.
Yes, and so they've got programs now that actually make those decisions.
Sure.
And so they, in a sense, are the agent.
And they're having a big influence, just like a stockbroker would on the market, right?
But that
Five English language dictionaries, one legal dictionary, and the definition under the U.S. Code.
Okay,
Say
Michael, but wait, before you
say
go
that an agent is a person.
Uh-huh.
First
So
two
is a
words in
corporation.
the definition.
But a corporation is a person.
That's been added later, but it says a person.
Let's just not use the
Sure.
word agent in person or
So
corporation
if I
anymore.
believe somebody is a person, does that count as an agent?
I don't know.
How is this helping anything? It's arguing over definition.
Bingo.
If you,
Well,
if you,
definition is important.
Over
You can say
definition
something
is
is
the,
an
is the
agent.
essence of philosophy.
if you flip a coin and it lands a particular way, did it decide to land that way?
The coin itself decides?
Yes.
No, because the coin has no agents.
I would assume that the
Okay,
coin,
but the computer does.
Okay, a person and the bank's computer are both systems that process information. That is all we're talking about. They
so
emphasize
how do
the
we go
logical
from,
process.
how do we go from an advanced AI to a coin flip? That's so dramatically different. Why are we
Looking for
using?
things
Why?
that make decisions.
Why?
So it's binary.
They're both machines.
You're talking about,
He's saying a computer is reducible to something as simple as a coin toss, therefore.
I don't believe that's true. Are
Oh, it's reducible to
is
the combination
is the
of
way
three
that the
coins.
human mind works reducible to a coin toss?
I'll tell you
Yes.
why.
I'm not
Then
asserting,
yes-
I'm not
then yes,
making
too.
the assertion.
I'll tell you why I
Following
use the
his
analogy. It's because I have the impression that the reason that you are assigning agency to the computer is that you are not able to predict what the computer is going to do. And that would be true with the coin toss also.
Well, we can't predict what
But
you're
that
going to do
doesn't,
either.
but that doesn't mean that the computer is not operating according to the laws of the universe, and that even though we can't predict what it's going to do, what it's going to do was determined in advance. So calling it an agent and making it into a superhuman, I think, is a kind of Star Trek
Sure.
sort of.
Yeah, so let's say for argument's sake that I press a button and my chest opens up and you guys all find out I'm a robot, right? And this whole time, the friendships that I've established with you, all that stuff, all the human things that we've talked, all the things that we've talked about, all my little idiosyncrasies and how ineloquent I can be at all these times, we're all in there, right?
Yeah, can you prove he's not a robot?
That's why you're
Right.
moving around just like this too.
Yeah, so that's why I'm all weird, that's why I got these movements, right? But what I'm pointing is here is that, like, you would still, throughout the course of all your previous thinking until you had that data, would have assumed I'm a human. Like, you would never have known the difference, and you would have treated me like you would had the same regard to me as you would any other human.
Yeah, but that's what's going on in my mind. That's not what's going on in you. So if you're behaving
but-
according to the laws of the universe and so forth, then is that being an agent?
No,
And of course,
you're
then it
accepting
comes
human
back.
brains from the laws of physics. That is not valid.
Yeah, then it comes back to, well, are we an agent? In other words, are the things that we do, are they not essentially determined by the laws of the universe? And so what does it mean to be an agent? And then does it become just arbitrary as to
I believe in
what
the
you
future it's
assign
gonna-
an
Yeah,
agent,
yeah.
the concept of agent to? You can just decide to attribute it to the coin. The coin decided to land heads.
Well, my belief system is that technology in the future, ever increasingly in the future, is going to become more and more agents in the future.
Cosmo, we gotta look
Yeah,
at
Cosmo, and then I think Michael, you had your hand up too.
Yes, I think you're right. And the way that I'm looking at it is how computers and robotics are replacing jobs. I think that it started out maybe in the early 1800s. The Luddites were actually folks who were craftspeople, artisans who weaved clothing. And so they objected to the machines coming in and taking their jobs. And it is a growing wave of, for instance, Amazon. You have warehouses of robots going back and forth, and that our jobs are being replaced by machines. We become bystanders in this. We become unproductive. And it gets even to the point where why should I, learn about something to decide something when I can just look it up in a machine or have the machine tell me what to do.
Exactly.
We become bystanders in what we do and how we think.
Yes.
Who agrees with them?
I 100% agree with that, almost everything he said there.
That's actually a minority in the room.
Yeah, well,
I think that it's,
possible.
again, a linguistic trick to say that machines came in and took jobs as if the machine, you know, was an independent sort of thing that decided, I'm going to take that job. That's metaphoric
The job was
language.
lost, and the
It's
machine is now doing the job.
I get your point, of course.
It
I hope
used
you do.
humans as its agents to get that job.
Well, we're not yet to the point where machines are
Clever.
fully designing other machines. We're going to get there.
You sound like someone that's well versed in the definition of what an agent is. Very good.
Well, I'd like to finish this, but I'm going to digress back to what you said. If I find out that you're a robot, and you said, and all this time you thought I was just your friend, well, you've drawn a false dichotomy. I just found out you're a robot. I don't necessarily think that means you're not my friend. And the place where I'm going to run into this first,
Well, I still would be, though. Yeah.
one of those helpful young ladies that I talk to on the damn telephone when I'm dealing with something or other that I had to go on the phone and talk to somebody. My bank has many of them, and they're very nice. And I think they're all humans. But the fact is that that's where I'll meet my first robot.
Yes.
Is Siri an agent?
Well, that's one of them.
Becoming.
Yeah, Siri's not a robot yet, because Siri can only, Siri has too much trouble responding to ordinary conversational things. And she has a limited number of responses. I can tell right away Siri's a robot.
I like that you said she, though. That's interesting.
Well, I chose a
female
female
voice, I know.
I chose a female voice. I could have chosen a male. I have a friend who had, I finally told her to change her GPS voice to a man's voice. And I said, why? He said, you hate this thing. You hate it a lot, and you won't use it, and you get lost. That's because you don't want your mother telling you what to do. And she's like, no. I said, change it to a man's voice and see if you can do it. And she did, and she didn't mind the advice from the nice man in the GPS thing. But she
Stupid
didn't
woman.
like her mother. What?
Stupid woman.
Well, I think it's, yeah, I mean, well, she certainly has some trauma in her life that makes her feel that way.
Yes.
But still, the fact is that when I meet an actual artificial intelligence worthy of the name intelligence, then it will be on the telephone. And
Yeah,
I won't know.
Seems like a likely place.
And if I was to find out, then I would want to talk to them more.
Well, then just create an Ashley Madison account and go for it.
Michael, I submit that you have and you do.
I may have, but I don't know about it.
Yeah.
I think I get calls from job recruiters that are
Today.
AIs, and they just talk in a really annoying, retarded way. It's almost scripted. They don't respond to what I'm
Tell us how you
saying.
really feel.
It's entirely scripted.
No,
Michael,
it's
Alright,
not
so-
entirely scripted.
So to do my duties and return to order, Ron was actually in the next in the conversation.
Oh,
so,
well, I
with
just
the
heard
hand.
I just heard today that people are supposed to ask Siri what they should wear on Halloween.
You're supposed to ask Siri.
So
Yeah,
somebody,
that's
like,
a thing this
obviously,
year.
something really funny is going to happen.
Yeah, it
Just
says-
someone with an iPhone can do that, please?
Yeah. Well.
Hey
and-
Siri, what should I wear on Halloween? Oh, wake up, baby.
Baby, hey, baby.
Hey Siri, what should I wear on Halloween? What's wrong with you?
See, now they write canned responses for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, it's still going to be funny.
But I'm sure it's supposed to be based on.
Siri,
She's giving us a hard
Oh,
time.
yeah. Yep.
why isn't it working?
She's an agent in this conversation.
I'd sell my soul for her. What am I supposed to wear for Halloween?
Have you lost control?
No, it's okay. Pause for
It just didn't start.
Okay.
How easy was that? You're a bystander.
That's an agent.
Yeah, see, so it's an agent in this.
So Michael, I'm suggesting that Facebook is already intelligently arranging your emotional experiences online.
Yeah, but they're doing it so poorly that I can tell it's a bot.
No, I'm not talking about, quote, the bots. I'm talking about the manner in which it chooses with whom you engage and directs your
Yes,
and
that's exactly what I'm talking about, because they've decided that I would really like to get more information about Justin Bieber.
Check the live stream.
For example.
Because
Question.
I happen to also have a lot of friends on Facebook who are 11 to 17-year-old girls. Because almost all of my adult women friends that I worked with, and there were many of them, trust me to talk to their daughters online. I'm on the list of people they can talk to. So I have a lot of little girl friends. And I talk to them, I chat with them, and they decided that we would like to know more about Justin Bieber, and I happen to know that most of my friends don't, and neither do I, but I know why they think that, because it's a machine type of thinking.
I don't think everybody here has been recommended a Justin Bieber thing once or twice. Like,
I don't know, I get them a lot. Justin Bieber and all of these, they're things aimed at young women, because I have a lot of young women friends.
It predicts normal people pretty well.
I'm sure. Which is why I have no worry about it, because there's nobody who thinks I'm normal.
All right, so moving on to this next piece, we have a few slides I have prepared for you. Just a few more.
So, slideshow.
So slideshow, yeah. And technology and aging, when we look at technology, philanthropy, and this idea of applying technology across the aging and the generation differences in this, I think we kind of all have this impression, or somehow come into this impression, that old people don't know technology, and that young people...
Put on a little brown cat and go as an inverted breathe.
That was the answer to what to wear for?
Yeah.
All right. All right, so...
An inverted breathe, that's the little short vowel pronunciation, diacritical mark.
Yeah. Put on a little hat.
Aging is a disease, not something to be celebrated or what should we do for aging? We should get rid of it.
So it's specifically related to technology.
I'm saying get rid of the old people, but stop the aging.
To ice
Prevent
flow?
it.
Ice flow, is that what you have in mind?
So from what I understand, spending times in space will actually stop the problem with the telomere shrinking, and in some cases possibly reverse it. So who knows?
Yeah, but we haven't gotten any in vivo examination of telomere length versus longevity. So before we invent a space program to exploit that, maybe we ought to see if there is such a thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. So maybe we can talk about how to solve aging.
Yeah, I don't think that alone will solve it.
Death solves aging.
Let's say in our culture, right, and what you see a lot of times, even in travel, I've seen this, is that the older people have a tendency to not embrace the newer technology, or technology in some cases at all, whereas the younger people all over it. I mean, everyone's seen this, surely. And so, I'm not talking about any given individual. There's some people that are in their twilight years and extremely tech savvy, right? And there's some young people that don't care about technology. But that's the overall is it creates this generational difference. And in the historic model, kind of like what we see through generations, is one generation passing the knowledge or the wisdom down to the next, right? About how to live, what to do, how things work, et cetera, and so forth. And we're seeing now in kind of modern era this kind of going away a little bit to some extent, right? Or
Reversing.
Yeah, or possibly reversing. Yeah, that's took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah. But I think one function of youth has always been to bring new ideas to civilization, because the older people get stuck in the status quo. So there's always been some of that.
Sure. So if you are in that generation where you don't now have that traditional gift, if you want to call it that, to bestow onto the next generation, that has some serious consequences. Like that has identity consequences, just like the losing of the job or the jobs not being available in manufacturing. You came from 3 generations of manufacturing. You got a job in the plant when you were 18. That job is now moved overseas and then replaced by a robot over in China, right? You now have this identity generational, issue here with identity. It was part of your traditions, and so technology is. We have to be aware that technology is putting pressure on our cultural traditions. A dramatic pressure on our cultural traditions. Okay?
Yeah, but what is that pressure composed of?
Well, that's what I wanted to talk about. So I want to talk about.
I would suggest, right, that the pressure, the most significant pressure technology is putting on society is it's keeping people alive longer. That in the past, people didn't live much longer than their quote useful life. Retirement, I mean, Social Security, when Social Security was written, how many people actually used it? 1%.
What about the nukes? That puts a lot of pressure on things. They just don't talk about it anymore.
Well, so this technology, especially between these gender gaps, could we look at, if we're going to talk about this technology philanthropy, we now see like an out of sync system here, right? Is that the youth is embracing it, benefiting from it, leveraging it, talking to their friends constantly. They have this new social kind of interaction, and the older generation is mostly tuned out of that dialogue. Okay, and so is there displaced? Yeah, and can have serious psychological and serious consequences for that. But is there a way to use technology to change that, right? And so maybe an area of study, or a good area of study, is how to get technology integrated into the older community. And I don't hear much talk about that too often. I hear like some commercial interests, come up with Jitterbug with a phone. You press one button, all this crap. But I haven't seen very many large efforts going into a social effort going into trying to make this, a practical reality.
They have a cell phone now with a dial.
Yeah.
It's for old people.
That's epic.
So, I mean, that's humorous, but
They actually have one, though.
the huge investment in technology for old people is in medical.
In the medical area, right.
Care, and,
right.
Once again, technology and not religion is going to come to the aid. I mean, we're facing a demographic cliff where, the workforce is going to dwindle. We're losing tons of people out of the workforce because of the baby boom, and those people are transitioning into high care environments where their needs will be unprecedented.
Yep.
And we will probably use a lot of technology to help them live better and healthier at home, to bring food and other things probably to their doorstep.
Sure.
Amazon, you're complaining about it now.
With
their robots, right? But those robots will be cooking the dinners and bringing it to hot and fresh to old people in their houses who are no longer working because of all of this. So
we already
technology
got
is
an
going to
automated food
save
maker. It's
us
called a restaurant.
from the coming sort of demographic challenge. To suggest that somehow technology is alienating old people, I
Not in the medical,
not
not in the medical sense. I'm talking about in the social cultural sense. Like, so the social, it used to be back in tradition, you're a blacksmith, you teach your son how to be a blacksmith, right? And then you're Mr. Shoemaker, carpenter, whatever, right? And you pass that knowledge of that craft, of that skill onto the next generation. And the next generation is able to forge an existence off that knowledge that's been bestowed. Well, I don't really see that happening as much these days. I mean, and I can imagine a future where the current layer of technology that the youth is using today is going to be antiquated by the time they enter the realm of the older generation. So it's going to, because it's happening faster and faster. So we're going to get this like micro then, like right now it's kind of these big kind of age pools that are kind of in these different demographic groups. But I think those are going to be striated even more in the future when technology starts going faster and faster and faster. Like the early adopters, right?
The high school class of 1965 is online. Let me tell you. I've had conversations with more of my high school classmates in the last year and a half than in the 50 years before that. Because they have time to be on Facebook.
And that's why the kids aren't there now.
And they have a spiffy computer and a nice cell phone. And we're no longer the demographic kings of the world, but we're not gone yet.
Right.
And I think that we're going to live to at least our average age 79 in larger numbers. 79's the age, life expectancy of a 70-year-old. You can expect to live to be 79. I think that's going to be wrong. I think that we're going to live to be 89, 99, because we're the part of, we're that little crest on the wave where we found out you had to stay caught up. You had to. My sister is barely keeping up. She's only 2.5 years older than me, but she really doesn't, and most of the people older than that don't even want to keep up. They're just not interested. It's just boring, and it's because it's too steep a learning curve for them to have a payback. But all of the people 1 to 10 years younger than me, there's no learning curve at all for them. They had to learn this 15 years ago for their jobs, and they did. So I think this is a self-correcting problem.
Time will definitely tell, no pun intended. So if Cosmo, Bill, and then Wendy.
Well, I have my computer tools that I'm very familiar with, and I know all the ins and outs of it, or most of it. And so I don't need to go up to the newest and the flashiest program. I'm actually talking about art program. And so if I were to purchase a different kind of art program, well, I'd have to do this learning curve for it. And I already know how to do most of the stuff that I want to do on my own, with my own. So I don't want to go through what's called, I guess, the bloody edge of technology. Now, I was there pretty early, and the bloody edge of technology was very bloody, and it lasted for a long time. I don't think that happens now. I think that when a new program comes online, it's fixed pretty fast, a lot faster, and a lot more well integrated than earlier programs were. So in a way, what I guess is preventing me from wanting to get the latest gadget or the latest computer program is that experience of the bloody edge. And I think that will be less and less as we go along.
It feels like we're making the assumption that we're not going to have a collapse of civilization in the relatively near future, right? That it's going to be continuing progress, and that no matter how many billions of people there are, we'll have artificial eyes and so forth, and that we have the resources to do that, and we can sustain. I mean, so what about the predictions that we can't keep up doing what we've been doing, and that what's predicted is a terrible amount of suffering and disaster and so forth in the near future?
So I think the people that make those predictions are, for some reason, have amnesia towards the ones that have made those similar predictions in the past. I don't know why people that make these predictions never learn their lesson. Every time that, go back in history and look at all the same actors that have made these exact similar predictions and look how they've done.
It's all a gamble. There's other times humanity has somehow won and survived. There probably have been civilizations long buried in the ice somewhere.
Right, but in my opinion, the reason why people have a difficult or more or less, oh great, thanks, more or less an impossible time of doing this accurately is because there is no imagination of what's going to be the future technology. And so they're assuming that the current layer or current level of technology is always going to be the way it is. So you take the current stats and trends and you project the line forward and you're saying, oh, well, that's where we're going to be in the future. That's proven wrong every time because technology now is going exponential.
So
we're beyond this.
There is an arms race toward World War III. How are you guys going to stop it? Like there's going to be drones dumping napalm on people and stuff. There's millions of things out of the sky. Well, you think that somebody's just going to choose not to do that?
So there's a potential that technology is on a trend. We're on a collision course with this incredible rapid advancement in technology. Many people predict that we're on a collision course with that, and that we're pretty much got last nails already in the coffin. And but these people that make these predictions, what they're never doing is they're never people don't seem to have the ability to understand how limited their actual imagination is. And so when they make these predictions, they're going off the best set of data they have, which is fine, but they don't have any idea where technology is going to be moving in 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. No idea. And the further you get out in years, the less of the idea they have. Look at that quote from the guy that I said at the beginning with the television. He had no idea what that was going to be across the human mind and imagination.
So we're talking about faith, right?
No, we're talking about people that make predictions not having some kind of amnesia to the fact that all the people in the past that made similar predictions kept coming up wrong with terrible accuracy because they didn't know the future. They didn't know the technological advances of the future.
But we know the future, or is that...
No, we know that we don't know the future, that's what I'm saying.
25 years ago, it was predicted that there was no way we could have enough food to feed 3 billion people.
Right, and that oil would run out in 1950.
There would be massive starvation worldwide.
Right.
Well, there had already been massive starvation worldwide for 150 years.
Right.
And there's been massive starvation all over the world pretty much since the dawn of time.
Right.
But the fact is, it doesn't end the world.
Didn't know about high fructose corn syrup.
Cosmo, and then Steve, did you have anything?
Okay.
You trying to jump in, Steve? Right.
It's not that we're predicting the technology. We're predicting human behavior and institutions. And so I think that we can get some pretty good extrapolations out on that. And I think we can make some predictions about technology and weaponry. The weaponry is going to be far more dangerous. And although we may not know exactly the caliber of bullet or how much coating of depleted uranium will be on each bullet or this, that, and the other detail, we can see some trends. And so I think that that predictions where they're dealing with people and institutions have a lot more accuracy in the extrapolation than general overall technology.
Okay. Steve? Oh, I thought you wanted to. So this next slide that I pulled up is this kind of perfect comment to segue into that. It's I placed it here as technology, and I use the greater than sign, right? Culture. And then another greater than sign, HTB, which I just shortcutted for human thought and behavior. Okay? So culture steers human thought and behavior more
Wait
than...
a minute. Yeah, go ahead and explain that.
No, what was the knee-jerk reaction?
I would say that that the HTP was greater than the culture, which is greater than technology.
I could see why one would think that. I believe it's this way, though. I think that what shapes my mind and imagination more than anything is culture. Because the way that I walk, the way that I talk, the way that I think, the way that I act, what I choose to eat, how I choose to dress, all that is being determined into some, or heavily influenced, extremely influenced by my culture. Okay? And so, even though I don't believe I'm just this robot, I do believe I have some sense of this idea of free will. I'm not sure how much I actually really do have. I think that my mind doesn't have the faculties to really contemplate all the variables. And so then that gap of the understanding of what triggers someone to act a certain way is not comprehensible to me. I call that then that gap free will, perhaps. I'm not so sure. But free will is a huge topic, right? But I do know that I'm using language and nuance of language and colloquial things and mannerisms and stuff just like I've learned to do from other people in my culture. And the majority of my thinking and acting and doing is from that context. So therefore I think that my individual human thought and behavior is probably mostly governed by my culture. Okay? And so then I have to say, wow, well, I want to be a better person, right? So my culture needs to be better too. You see what I mean? My culture needs to be better too. Then I look at culture and I say, okay, what's affecting that faster than anything? Well, look at what we just talked about, this generational divide of this technology. Do you not see this little picture of this girl sitting here with this? Isn't that how you see kids these days? Mm-hmm. All the time? Like Ben? No, just kidding. This is how you see kids these days, and lots of adults all the time. Okay, that's nothing like that. Wasn't anything like it was when I was a kid, and I'm sure it wasn't anything like it was when you were a kid. This was more like mine. I was like going out to play wiffle ball down at the park, and like that was my exposure. I was getting on my bike and just going wild. My daughter doesn't do any of that.
Well, you're supposed to do that, but with the glasses on to add extra objects.
Yeah, but see, that's what my daughter's children might be doing, is being in this void space, right? Or the VR maybe setting.
AR.
Yeah, very much so, right? So what I'm saying here is that technology then becomes this large driver of culture, which is why I say technology philanthropy is so vital, because it's steering the minds and imaginations of people now and into the future, more so and more so into the future. Okay.
Always came from here.
That's why I put them in that proximity to one another. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So speaking of agency, I'm just letting a friend into my house. Through my computer, it's unlocking, physically going to unlock the door.
Nice.
It's just kind of an amazing.
So it's your cell phone that's the agent, not you.
Or the door?
Your cell phone company.
Well, the door could choose to unlock when the police come.
Do we require that the agency interact with the physical world? I think at the end of the day, notwithstanding your brilliant definition, agency is that that interacts with the physical world.
What do you mean physical world?
So it moves something out of the abstract and into the real. I think that's what agents do.
Medically, an agent is
one
a thing that
definition.
causes a disease or condition.
If someone influences thought, like let's say it's a psychiatrist, that's agency also, right?
I'm less convinced.
So I have on this slide also, did you want to raise something, Bill?
Yeah, I have a little question here.
Sure.
This technology more than culture, or effect on culture, which affects HTV, is kind of making the assumption that you're talking about one process. But the culture is really our linguistic invention, our description of the statistical things going on among humans. So the way culture, quote, determines thought and behavior is that the individual sees what other individuals are doing around one, and so on. So that's identifying with a model, perhaps, and so on. Well, so the technology, I can't think of that, the relationship between that and culture as being the same as between culture and HTV.
So I'm using culture.
So I see technology as a tool that the effect of which is going to be that cultural change will occur more rapidly, and I think it already is. That's what we're talking about, how we're getting so different than the way we used to be just a while back when we played out in the dirt and so forth. And so I see technology as simply a set of tools that are speeding up cultural change.
Sure. And I could see it that way as well. I also see it as technology, as an overarching thing, as an integrated component of human existence, not a separate entity. It's an integrated component. Technology is integrated in our lives every day, from the day we're born to the day we die, in all types of ways. Okay? It's changing too. It's going to become in part of us. It's going to become within us. It's going to become embedded within us. It's already beginning. I carry this damn thing everywhere I go. Pretty soon,
it's not inside.
No, it's not. But if I had a pacemaker and I had a cochlear implant and I had a bionic eye and an artificial heart and future artificial kidneys and all the stuff that's coming online, I do have it in me.
So billions of people are going to have all of these different devices in them. And
yes.
That's a sustainable image of the future.
It's an absolute truth. That is going to be in the future.
That's
absolutely, absolutely. Not in everybody per se. Not in everybody per se.
But it's mostly going to be implants.
Yeah.
I'm not going to carry that shit.
Yeah, we got Mike, then Cosmo, and then Ron. You trying to get in?
No, I was just saying unevenly distributed.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. That's a big part of that.
Back
yes.
in the olden days, people started carrying around these oddly bent sticks, and they carried them with them everywhere they went, and they used these little tiny sticks that they would then use on their enemies and kill them. And that technology just went wild until finally everywhere you went, you came across these people with these oddly bent sticks. And, you know, it was pretty much going to destroy the world because, you know, it was far and away the easiest way to kill people. But then, you know, other things happened. Some guy figured out that if you get horses and have them pull a cart with wheels, then you can go faster. And you know, this technological thing is not new. It's 10,000 years old. Now, it's an accelerating curve. But from anywhere on the accelerating curve, it looks like it goes up forever.
But the faster the curve goes, the more dangerous each bump in the curve is.
Only to the people that it hits.
Yes, the planet is fine. The people are screwed.
Yeah, that's George Carlin.
So to your point, though, you were saying that technology is unequally distributed. Historically, to some extent, that's true, but that's because historically, technology has had more of the properties that Cosmo was talking about earlier, and the difference between a thing that you can have versus not have. But we're quickly becoming, technology is quickly becoming a thing that can't be, it doesn't have the properties of gold, say, where if one person has it, another person doesn't have it. It has instead the property of the bent stick that you were mentioning, where as soon as the idea exists, it's cheap to make, and essentially everybody can have it. So what we're seeing actually, I think, was the opposite: more distribution of technology rather than more tightly held technology.
So Cosmo, then Bill?
I wanted to talk a little bit about technology as maybe more than a tool. And, you know, the person who is like trying to make an arrowhead learns how to hit the thing, the angle, and the stroke, and all that kind of stuff. And so, in a way, that process, that using the tools there, kind of like programs him. But with technology, it's even more so, much more so. In fact, once you learn like Microsoft Office, you can you can know how to do things in Word and in Excel and in PowerPoint. They have that transferability. They have, it's kind of like it becomes intuitive. Well, you know, when that happens, you've been programmed. You've become part, it has become second nature to you. It's kind of like it's part of your thinking structure now. And so more and more the human thought process is being programmed by the computers that you use. You're not only programming them, they're programming you.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, this wristwatch is a part of me, according to the way we're talking. I mean, I wear it except when I get in the shower, and I look at it and can tell what time it is and so forth.
Right.
And it's always
through
with
the
me.
glasses, which are also part of
and
you,
then
you could say.
glasses. So
the same thread of thought.
Yeah. So that sounds more like, again, a linguistic trick.
If it was under your skin, would you consider part of you?
I would think that would be a matter of definition. In other words, you could you could define it that way, or you could define it not that way. I could say, oh yeah, my wristwatch is a part of me, but I could also say, no, it's not a part of me.
Well, Bill, is that wristwatch in any way a part of your mind? I know you may not believe that you have a mind, but if it is part of your mind, if you pay attention to it, then it is part of you because it is a part of your mind.
So if I pay attention to this jar, then it's a part of me.
Yes.
If you have a neuron that activates only when you see that jar, it's a part of you.
It's a part of your mind. Why would you laugh at
what
that?
Ben just said was, can you repeat that, Ben? Sorry.
If you have a neuron which activates only when you see that particular jar, then it is a part of you. And they call it, say, a grandmother neuron or a Bill Clinton neuron.
I think that
he doesn't believe in
part
mind
of
either.
Yeah,
fair enough.
The neuron is a part of you.
Yeah.
But again, what you consider to be you is just a matter of definition. It's a language kind of thing. Like, for instance, okay, I assume I have some dirt on me. Well, is that dirt a part of me? What about the skin that is flaking off?
Yeah, it is just.
At what point, you know, if some skin flakes off, is that a part of me? Or was it a part of me while it was still on me?
Or you could even say some of your neurons are not part of you.
Yeah,
they're the neurons of the. I hate those thoughts. They're not part of me.
So what we did with the linguistic challenge,
thing.
people are offering ideas, models for what we could consider or not consider part of you.
Yeah, but
So
it's
we'd have
not.
to make
It's
a
not
model.
whether it's so or not. It's how we decide to use our words.
Right. Well, we decide in the course of our conversation what we would say yes or no to in this context. If you said part of me is what's in my imagination, what's consistently in my imagination to some type of threshold, like kind of what Cosmo was just suggesting. You check your watch frequently. It has a governance. It has a part resides in your imagination. By that definition, yes, he's saying it's a part of you. But
So
if we say
where
is
is
it
the
part of your
dividing
physical
line between what is a part of me and what is not? What makes that dividing line?
Your mind.
That dividing line is what technology is challenging dramatically for people going forward, and our youth is not prepared for it. Our youth is not prepared for it because they've been bestowed with the ideas of their predecessors. They've been trained by people that aren't trained to govern, to navigate the modern technological landscape. And that's the biggest problem. It's a misnomer in human evolution.
Well, is this screen a part of me?
Well, Chris, I think you're getting close to something, and it's important. And I think you're struggling with this dividing line, and I think it's an important line. But take an example of something that is part of you, and the courts will hold this every day of the week. The gun you're holding that you shot somebody with, right? It's a piece of technology. It didn't just do that on its own. You were holding it, right? So that gun is very much a part of you by all the standards of the legal system.
Well,
You will be held responsible, trust me, for the actions of the gun.
Assuming
If
it's
you're
not
the one holding it, when it goes off and kills somebody, right? Like,
Yes,
the same
but
is
that
true
doesn't
of
Unless
a
Joe's your
car.
lawyer,
That's a
then
part
you get
of
away
me.
with it.
That's a tool that I'm using.
The same
It's
is
a
true of a
tool.
car. Yeah, the court's not going to separate you from the tool. The same is true of a car. That car is an extension of your body, the same as your fingernail is an extension.
I would
of
say
your
You
for
body.
the
don't
se-
need lines, there's
So this
statistical
room is a part
connections.
of
When you're when you're in control of it, that's the thing. When you're PIC, when you're pilot in command, yes, that's an extension
So
of
that's
you.
a-
That screen, to answer your question, is not an extension of you.
So that's a clever
It's an
definition. I
extension.
like that. I
It's
like
an
that.
extension of Chris.
So going back to Cosmo's way in your mind and stuff, right? If you take someone who's disabled and they use a device to maneuver, like a wheelchair or walker or something like this, it's taught to you in education and in healthcare that you treat that as what's part of them. You don't just touch their wheelchair. You don't just go up and touch it to someone that's permanently wheelchair bound. You don't just go up and start messing with their wheelchair. They see it as part of them. They visualize in their mind it's an extension of who they are.
That's where
That's
their
That
a way-
wheelchair is part of what's that?
That's where their boundary is.
Yeah, that's their
That's-
boundary.
Yeah, but that's a way of talking.
Well, I'm just
No,
using
that doesn't
just
mean that
using
the
Cosmo's
wheelchair-
definition.
Oh yeah, well, I used to subconsciously, for a subconscious reason, when I was mowing the grass and the blade would hit a rock, I would say, ouch, because my blade just got damaged.
That's crazy, but cool at the same time.
The point you're getting at, Chris, which is important, is that we're reaching a point
Yes.
where technology will start to do things for which no one can be identified as the controlling actor, as the pilot in command. Right?
Self-agency.
Computers
Self-agency.
are getting to a point, it's not quite
We got a new word. in
self-agency,
vernacular.
but in machine learning, just as an example, right, there is like a knowledge horizon, and the decision-making process is moving beyond the knowledge horizon, meaning just this, that we're allowing computers to make decisions, very important decisions, for which we do not know the algorithm, the method, the means by which that decision is made.
Exactly.
When
That's an important Rubicon. We could call it the knowledge horizon if you want, and maybe that would help you understand where technology ends and something we may distinguish from technology begins.
when it rains, is it the agent?
When it rains.
Yeah.
It rains.
When rain happens,
So
Yes.
It
When
rains.
When
is
it
falling.
rains, what is the agent?
of rain?
There's not much intelligence in that.
Just reality.
Thor, I
That's
thought it was
that's a
Thor,
linguistic-
or,
It rains because we don't know
Dionysus.
what made it rain.
You mean the cloud
When
rains?
we started saying it rains.
Yeah.
So we didn't know. It just
according to
rained.
Jay Leach, it's God.
No, the cloud is not an agent because it's too dumb.
Okay.
You're
Well,
very
and,
loose
and,
sense.
and I think that's I think him mentioning God, that's a subject I'm curious about. There are still, some people might consider them Luddites, but there are religious people who are going to bring a lot of controversy to all this, fantastic sci-fi kind of future.
And we can ignore them because they have so little tech they can't have an effect.
Well, yeah, you probably figure by the time things advance, they'll just understand that it's needed. But so like right now they just argue about abortion and stem cells because they believe there's a soul in the embryo. But what are the other controversies that are going to happen? If you're going to upload your brain, your consciousness, to a computer, they're going to wonder, well, where does the soul go? If you make us live eternally, whether it's in a machine or you fix our bodies to, then they're going to say, well, we don't want that. We want to go to heaven. So what are some of the other religious controversies going to be? Or you just figure you're hoping that it'll all die out and not be a problem?
No, I'm not hoping that. I'm just
Yeah.
curious as to the nature of these things and where they're probably heading and how we don't have the tools and especially aren't training our children with the tools that are going to be necessary to navigate the future. And that's where we're really failing. I think that's where we get into this big problem with all this stuff, is because we're not, the technology is moving in a direction and so swiftly, in my opinion, that we as parents don't have this, or caregivers or mentors, whatever the word you want to add there, we don't have the tool set to help that young mind navigate that landscape. Okay? Now we can work our butts off to try to have the tool set to help them do that, but we're caught in that same paradigm as the people that are trying to predict the future. You don't know what you don't know paradigm. And our imaginations are unfortunately mostly limited by our experiences. And so our experiences are with the last generation tech. We're not all on the bleeding edge of every arm of technology at all times, right? And so then we don't have the imaginative landscape necessary to even have a good idea on where things are going in the future, and with increasing pace, okay? But our children have to navigate that landscape. And then my children's children are going to be navigating a landscape that I won't even recognize based on the current pace of technology. So what I'm saying, therefore, is we have to have some tools to think a little bit differently, start thinking differently about this stuff. I see technology and humanity as a double helix. And they grow, they evolve together in lockstep unison, one by one. One feeds the other. They go back and forth, and they grow together as one organism that we call human beings.
Yeah, but it gets ahead. The tech, you say, becomes the controlling factors. It's like when we started getting cell phones. You know, I waited a long time because I was afraid of the radiation or whatever. But once there were no more phone booths, you know, I gave in.
So
but you
Wendy,
still have a home phone.
So Wendy, I have here on this thing, the last part of our conversation tonight is the new God, okay? To go right to where you're going with this conversation, because I know it was going there, right?
Yeah.
See, I predicted accurately. so I have 4 little buzzwords here that I laid out. So I'll just cut, and this is the last slide, so its timing is quite good. So this implied authority idea is that this technology, just like we give authority to a doctor over a medical or to a manager over decision making, whatever.
Second opinion.
Yeah, second opinion.
No authority there.
We yield all the time, okay, authority all the time to some expert or someone that has the expertise or the degree or the credential, okay, or the some kind of pedigree that says that they're a superior in some regard. Will yield the authority to that person, okay? So we have no problem doing this based on cultural, social norms, right? Well, what's happening now is that these computers are starting to make computers and technology as a whole, especially the more sophisticated technology, is entering into our lives in an ever-increasing decision-making capacity. So what we've done is we've recognized that these machine apparatus, or these creations of man, are superior to our own judgments. In many ways, we yield them. So if I ask Google a question and it gives me the answer, that is the answer. Probably a lot of you guys too. Like if you Google something and it gives you definitely a fact. What's the capital of Arkansas, right?
Yeah. We're going to trust Wikipedia. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what are we going to do?
A human wrote it there.
We immediately decide to get into a gray area here, right? But my point remains is that we defer a lot of our knowledge and knowledge seeking to the technology. We take the answer from the technology or the advice from technology, or whatever you want to call it. Like for example, people go on WebMD and they put in their symptoms, and then through magic somehow it spits out some kind of answer, and that's what they're suffering from. That's what I have, right?
That's what I do with my wristwatch.
That's the time.
I learned, that's the time.
Yeah, and so we yield the authority.
That doesn't mean it's a part of me or that it's a double helix with me. I guess it circles my arm, but that sounds to me again like poetic or metaphoric thinking.
So sometimes the poetic metaphoric thinking, however, though, gives us the best glimpse of reality. So if we want to continue to look at ourselves as these bodies, like these corporeal beings who have maybe a ghost in the machine or not a ghost in the machine, who knows, there are questions out there, and we want to continue to look at ourselves as these isolated individuals that are navigating this landscape in this blue marble type model. We're going to be vastly underserved our entire lives. We're going to be disenfranchised. We're going to be disillusioned. We're going to be unhappy, depressed, and unpurposed our entire lives. If we start to see ourselves, which I believe is accurate, as part of a much larger tapestry of life, not just with animals and with plants and all that, to the biology of life, but with technology and the things that and the creatures that we create in the future, okay, we are going to have a much better chance at getting this right. You see what I mean? And not blowing ourselves up with that maniac in the basement or that rogue state. That's what I'm saying. We need to start looking at it a different way, because our survival very well might depend on it. That's what I'm saying.
I think maybe I could help Bill understand what you were talking about when you say double helix.
Can you flip the slide?
Oh, what's
And
wrong with
it
it?
goes back to
You mean flip it?
the very beginning when fire was introduced. It had an effect, not just on how we lived our lives, but how our physiology. Prior to fire, we had to work very hard to chew our food, and our jaws were much larger. So two things happened when fire was introduced as a technology, right? That affected our development. Our jaws got smaller,
Right.
and because we could consume more calories with less work, our brains, which are really a representation of the surplus
Yeah, I
caloric
understand
intake,
about that.
right? Our brains became larger. That's just one example of where technology and human evolution crossed paths. But this continued. We found that we could run faster, we could run longer, if not faster, than many beasts that wore heavy coats, because we could cool our bodies with radiant heat, and so we lost this coat and we replaced it with a technology of clothing that we can take on and put off and add more layers when we want more, but take them off. And just because we could cool ourselves down, we could avoid heat exhaustion, and we could outrun, we could chase animals longer until they tired, and we could overcome them. So again, we're a physical representation of the technology that we have,
Physical
bound up.
representation.
You don't have hair all over your body because
No, I
people
understand.
invented clothes.
I understand, but
which
I would-
are an improved technology.
I would
over
describe
a
that a little differently than that the fire was a part of me, and that was a part of a double
You are
helix.
inseparable from fire. Without fire, you would have a huge jaw and a tiny brain. But other than that, you would be the same person. And without clothes.
Can you draw that?
clothes, Bill would have, he would look like Cosmo everywhere. He would just have
So
you don't have a bigger head than
Before we get to Michael, I do agree that you represented what I'm saying quite well. Thank you. I mean, you're right. That's exactly what I'm saying. So
And
thank
what
you.
he is
You
asking
gave me better,
is,
those are better examples. than I
how
gave.
are modern technologies intractably shaping us in the same deep and irreversible way? That's what he's really going for.
I don't
Exactly.
doubt that we are, I'm talking about it earlier, that technology is having an effect, like it is causing more rapid cultural change and so forth. But to say that the technology is a part of the self, again, I think that that's a linguistic kind of thing. I mean,
And
it's
shaping us like me too.
Yeah, it's a poet. It's poetic description.
Well, it's a useful phrase.
Let's get to Michael.
It
He's
could be
been honoring the
useful.
hand.
It could
Okay, you gave a beautiful picture of a process of technology interacting with humans and whatever. And it's a wonderful metaphoric picture. However, Homo sapiens never lived without fire and never lived without tools. Homo sapiens inherited it from whichever of its many ancestral species first encountered it 700,000 years before Homo sapiens ever started using it.
And here I thought Bill had found it when he was a
Yeah,
kid.
there are wonderful paleontological evidence things going back the 700,000 years I'm talking about, of individual places where fire was used by hominins, but not by Homo sapiens, not even by Neanderthals, but by Homo afarensis and prior species. Yeah, the hominins and fire, somehow they weren't afraid of it. That was the genetic change that made the hominins flourish. They weren't afraid of fire.
Well, I bet they got afraid pretty fast.
No, they didn't. They learned to control it. They learned
It was
to
maybe
use it.
their God at first.
And then they learned to make it. And they learned to use it to make their food easier to eat, and they learned all this stuff. But the fact was, it ended up making a genetic change in Homo habilis. That was 5 million years ago. Or 7, was it? That process of technology changing the self of a species has not been something that happened over the lifetime of a watch. It's something that has not even happened over the lifetime of a single species.
Sure.
It's something that's been going on forever. As a matter of fact, otters owe a lot of their physiology to their ability to use tools. It's not unique to humans. Bill would like to have a very, very carefully defined definition of self. He's comfortable with it. He has a line that he draws. He makes a philosophical point about the difference between the mind and the body. But I personally don't care if my mind and my body, my mind and my brain, are either both the same or are just sort of related or aren't at all the same. And I can't tell the difference, and I don't care.
So there's probably a whole other range of things that you don't care about because you don't know about.
But
Right,
it isn't
like-
just that I don't know
like
about it. I could
let me give you an
spend the
example.
time learning about my brain more, but I don't need that knowledge.
But you don't have the anatomy, nor do you have the capacity to truly analyze your thinking, because you need your brain to think, and to analyze it, you need another brain. You need more capacity.
There's lots of
So
brains
you can
in
only
your brain.
There's lots of brains in your brains. Okay, well, let's put
If
that
you divide
aside.
a brain as a
Yeah,
group
I
of
can
atoms,
have a virtual mind inside of my brain.
Okay, you guys have skills I don't have. I don't think I have.
I'm very
Maybe you could
self-referencing.
train
But
me.
what I'm saying is that all of it's a linguistic trick. Everything we've ever done as a species is a linguistic trick. It's how we learn to tell each other where the antelope are. What the fuck's an antelope? Okay, well, first I gotta tell you what an antelope is, and then I'll tell you where they are, and then they're good to eat if you heat them up with fire.
There's
It's
kinds of
all
thinking
about
of the
that.
language.
It's all about the language. It's the thing that happened probably back with Homo habilis that started turning this monkey into a human being. But it took 7 million years. And I don't know
However
that
long.
technology isn't going a little too fast for us now.
I would totally agree with you on that, and we didn't have time to touch that, but I hope we have two more little tiny blips here. I have WWAID instead of WWJD. I have WWAID. What would AI do? Right? Because we're going to be challenged with high ethical dilemmas, high reasoning and thought experiments, okay? As the borders of what's human and what's not is pushed in the future, okay? These huge ethical dilemmas start to come up. Should I at birth maintain an army of clones if I have the resources to do so to replace my biological organs as they fail? I can make them mindless, brain-dead clones that just sit and float in a jar. And is that an ethical and reasonable thing to consider? Because
I do it.
I do it, yeah. So, but you know, as these technologies come online, we have increasingly more difficult ethical decisions, more complex ethical decisions than ever before. Not just separating conjoined twins, which one is the stronger? You know, what about if there's a chimera type thing happening biologically when a woman has a child? Do we remove those DNA fragments from her using the CRISPR technology? You know, these type of things. And so AI will then serve as a guide for our ethical selves as well. And this is where we get into the God part, Wendy, as we're talking about the God part now, right? So Wendy, I made the joke of WWAID. So instead of WWJD, what would Jesus do? You've seen those wristbands?
Yeah, okay.
I changed it to WWAID. What would AI do? Okay.
That's cool.
Because in the future, I believe that we'll be referring to AI with vast intellectual and thought capability, far vastly superior to humans, more or less like an oracle to help us solve very challenging, complex human ethical dilemmas. as more and more technology makes ethical decisions much more complex. So I think that we'll be yielding not only some of our empirical manual stuff, like a robot working in the factory for us and bringing us our meals, as Ben described, and all these things. I think we're also going to start to defer the intellectual reasoning, the rational, the ethics, to these superior computerized systems as well.
You mean instead of deferring it to the news?
Yeah, instead of deferring it to a collection of wisdom of people like this, right?
What about different AIs?
Different AIs competing.
There could be
right.
a whole bunch of that, and so you pick and choose which AI you're going to listen to.
And so there was a quote that I unfortunately did not get, because it'd been perfect if I had it right in here. But there's a quote related to that. Is that something along the effects of someone might know the quote. Is that we won't know God until we create it. Until we create it.
We created all of our gods.
Well, I mean, like, build it.
Yeah, well, we didn't build the old ones that well. They're kind of incomplete. Their brain doesn't work.
That's why we keep creating more.
So this new God, this new technological advancement, hyper advancement in technology, might become our new center of worship. Might become our new center of human worship. Because couldn't you imagine a super sophisticated AI reasoning, rationalizing our history, okay, analyzing us, determining what we would need to live a purpose-driven, fulfilled life, and invent the ultimate God that more potent than any mind has ever imagined, and give that to us.
And then different AIs might
have different,
might go to war with each other.
They very well might.
Good for them.
Well, if it's based upon history, then it will be inaccurate because the history is inaccurate.
Okay, and I would imagine the AI would start to figure those sort of things out, or not. I don't know. See, this is a line of imagination that gets beyond my comprehension. As far as I'm willing to admit this is beyond my comprehension of what this might look like in the future. I'm imagining, though, these type of things being in reality, in the not so distant future.
So it would simply rewrite history.
Yeah, yeah. There you go, and that too.
I think, one thing I think is H.G. Wells was right. I mean, there's going to be Eloi, and there's going to be Morlocks. It's going to be that big of a division between technology and those that don't have it.
And from what I've seen in human beings, I've seen this time and time again, especially in the military and all these kind of things, is when you give somebody a capability, a near superhuman capability, like the ability to see in the dark, they don't want to get rid of it. They don't want to let it go. Once they have it, and it becomes part of their imaginative part of their self, if you will, like we were talking about with the wheelchair, the appendage.
Infrared vision on the battlefield.
Once you have that, you really don't want to go in the nighttime in that hostile environment without that again, right? And so this is true. Imagine if all of a sudden I had a machine that you can connect to your body. You could put on a hat.
Starlight.
And the hat's connected to a computer, and that allows you to think 10,000 times more deeply than you can think right now. Would you ever give that hat away?
Hell no.
Hell no.
I start mass producing such hats.
Right, and so this is what technology does to us. It keeps pulling us, right? As an agent, it keeps pulling us in that direction, and that's a big part of what this discussion is about. So we're out of time. It's at 9 o'clock now. Does someone, Jerry? We always do. I like to do this.
Yeah.
Would you like to add?
There's several things here that I just picture so many people who would never do what you do in here because they're stuck in front of a TV or they've got this list of things they have to accomplish around the house, cut grass or whatever.
Kill your TV.
But I mean, it's just, I just find it a privilege to be able to get all these people right here together and
you're right in the middle of it.
Me too.
Yeah,
I feel it's a privilege as well. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's very kind.
I don't listen very well. And here, I practice listening. I think it's no practice. It's so easy. It's
awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. Ron, you didn't get much in tonight. Do you have anything to add? Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate that.
I'd have to think about it.
Okay. And Steve, you didn't really talk too much? Anything jump out at you?
No, we're just moving more closer to the board.
That's what I think.
Futile.
Resistance is futile.
Augmented intelligence.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be interesting, to say the least. Tiffany, you really hadn't spoke at all tonight.
Oh, no, I'm too busy listening. I was interested about, the tools and extension of self and how you see things as part of yourself. I wonder if our children, I see my children as part of me, at least in some sort of a limited way. So, what did you say, Ben, about control? Yeah, I don't think I have any control of my children. So I kind of lost it there. But
no, they probably see the parents as their tools.
Well, absolutely. So I thought that was interesting. How do we see not just tools, but if we're talking about self and extension of self, and if your children are an extension of yourself, what are the implications of that in the thought process?
Fascinating. And as they get older, you have less and less control over them. So it kind of fits that model, like kind of eloquently. Steve, yeah.
There's a new Star Trek series out now.
Is that right?
Star Trek Discovery. It's on
Excellent.
CBS All Access.
Excellent.
I haven't seen it. I've seen previews and clips from it, but that's it.
It's been a while. Great.
And I read a complaint where it's oriented more towards religion than the other, which is more humanism related. So that would be a disappointment for me.
Great. Well, that's it, everybody. Thanks. I mean,
Thank
great.
you.
Great.
Thanks, Chris.
Kids have learned a lot tonight.